start streaming because we can. Oh, what the heck was that? Man. Okay. All right. So there we are. And there is Robert and Glenn. And we're there, see? Nice, mild 82 degrees. Got about a half inch of rain. David and Kent, yeah, half inch of rain out this way, not Superstition's area, but out here. So Steve's there. Ah, so there we are, Friday afternoon, finally. But we had a bit of rain this week. Supposed to continue through till Monday, I believe. Hey Ed, hey Jason. Hope you're feeling better and feeling well. Um, so there we are. So we're kicking it along, um, getting out there. As Stelcox, we need the rain. Yeah, I know the Midwest and Texas and all that. Yeah, Jason, I see you made it. But yeah, the Midwest and Texas and all are in a drought. They're having a hard time of it. We're getting good soaks. So, and we're getting nice cloudy. Hopefully it moves that way, but we got that. Is it a low pressure that's right now? Bringing things up through the Gulf. And so it's overcast. It's cooled down. I think next week it's supposed to drop down into the 70s and 80s. So we're getting there finally to nice weather. We're going to have the coolest late October possibly that we've ever had in 10, 15 years. And we moved to the rendezvous in November. So hopefully we're not freezing. That's my fears. It's gonna end up be bitterly breezy, rainy, and cold because we moved it a couple weeks out. But we'll see what happens. So this week, what's been happening? It was again like last week, a little quieter. I was pretty busy, so there was a few phone calls and things, but kind of pulling things together for the rendezvous. I want to go out tomorrow, like today, Hewitt or Four Peaks. Yeah, and the one thing you want to watch is the road in, especially going Hewitt, is Queen Creek. If a bunch of rain dumps, Queen Creek can flood and you can't get out. So that's the thing you want to. It's not going to snow, Kim, but yeah, you really don't want to get stuck on the wrong side of that. So a lot of times we would avoid Hewitt if they had possibility of storms because you don't know where the rain's going to go. And if you've ever been out there when it floods and that rain really picks up, I mean, Fish Creek, you can see stuff up in the trees, 6, 7, 8 feet in the air. But down at Queen Creek, I've been down there and watched it where it's just washing down through there. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of that. Never got out of the 60s here in North Carolina today. Well, there you go. And this week I picked up a couple cool books. This one, Treasure Bonanza Worth $1 Billion by Xanthus Carson. Interesting to me because I own Xanthus Carson's collection, and it was published by Oscar Branson, and Oscar Branson's collection's also out there. So it was kind of a neat pickup. A bunch of treasure stories like Penfield and so forth and Mitchell. But I thought that was of interest to me as, oh, well, okay, I got a Xanthus Carson book. Xanthus is the one that I have the manuscript for, I forget the name. Anyways, I got some of his manuscripts, unpublished manuscripts, so it's very cool. So Victorio Peak. But, yeah, I have the Victorio Peak as told by Doc Noss's daughters. I have the original manuscript with the photos that are taped to it before it never went to the printers, and I have that from him. Then the other one was a cool one, was Leland Lovelace, Lost Mines and Hidden Treasure, which is an oldie from the 50s. So that was neat, both of these. And they both have a little Arizona Lost Dutchman in them. But it was just neat. I like some of these. I have Penfield, I have Mitchell, I have Dobie, and then I have Probert, So it's nice to have those collections of some of those different treasure stories and see how those definitely changed over the years. Never say never. Date with a Dutchman is tomorrow at museum. I wonder If it is still going to happen, it'll happen. I don't know. Right on Four Peaks it is. Um, yeah, I would just watch anything crossing over because you don't know when it's going to dump. And it can come in an hour or two and dump on you, and then it just suddenly, I know the day we were filming for Legends that we went to Clay Ware's house, and it was a light sprinkle in the morning, and then we went over there and it dumped. And we ended up taking an hour break so I could radio in with my crews from the utility company. We'll just say it that way. And dealing with them and having to bring a bunch of people in because of the weather and the traffic and the flooding. And it didn't seem like, and it clears out in a couple hours or so sometimes. But man, that really dumped on us, and it was pretty crazy how much water we got in just a matter of an hour or so. Do you think the government the government obviously got into Victoria Peak. So anyways, so that's interesting on that level. We have a really cool story that is developing that will be a bittersweet story eventually here too. So Robert will be definitely interested in that. But there'll be a number of people that ears will perk up if I ever decide to really pull the trigger on that story. It involves the museum and the historical society. I usually try to be really nice, and I am one of their guest speakers this year on their lecture series. I'm closing out their series, and I always draw a big crowd. First time was like 1,000 people both times. I did two a couple of years ago, and they invited me back, and there's a story within a story within a story of all that, and it would be interesting to tell. It's going to cause people a real different hard look at a lot of things, and I don't think it's surprising when people step out of it. But just Kim will get maybe the inside dig on this, that it's the difference between not being a Dutch hunter, thinking you're kind of a Dutch hunter, and being a Dutch hunter is kind of the difference and all that. Let's see. Here's Tony. Hiya, Wing. Hey, Trevor. Well, no Trevor. He's doing football. It's Friday. Working away from home. Okay, yeah. Trevor's doing football again, so we didn't have the intro up still because Trevor hasn't worked on the intro. He's been pretty much this week. There was flag football. There was a couple volleyballs. And there was football. So when he does have the evening a little quiet, I just left him alone. Figure this weekend we have a bunch of shorts to do. We're going to knock out a couple videos. In fact, last week we already had the video for last week done ahead of time. So I'm going to try to get a couple done this week to because he's in that schedule where he's got so much to do with work and other things. This is kind of tough. Because we'll have to remember he's not only working full-time, and on his full-time job he has literally almost another full-time job working for DSB, doing live broadcasts of all the high school athletics and so forth for the district. But on top of that, he's also working on his doctorate, so he has a full plate. So I've been trying to kind of let that slide, long as we're getting out and we're getting the lives in and there's videos going up every day. I'm just kind of cool. So it's supposed to be flooding again in Globe. That's just because they don't have a sewer system, and it's like a slot canyon from Miami into Globe, and it just runs. It's just the mountains and the water's got to go somewhere. So when they do get rain, it's problematic. Hello, Nebraska. And here's one to Bob Ward. One to all the Bobs. So that being said and done. So we're getting closer to rendezvous time. Jason Fritsch is here with us. There's a couple other people. And we're getting more and more things set and slid in. It's nice because I get to concentrate on Halloween, because usually it's rendezvous Halloween and it's bang, bang. And I got my head in two different spaces this year. I'm just kind of sitting back, and I know I got a couple weeks to breathe to pull all the rendezvous stuff together, which is already being piled up and put together, and ideas and things and lists and stuff. So that's going really well. Here's to Bob. Yeah, thank you, Ed. Still, I'll push out, well, we talked about Jason's book, this one as well. You can go to the website, Doug Stewart. It's Lost Dutchman Bibliographies. It's online still. You can see Jason's book should be on there. It has a list of all the books, fiction, nonfiction, interrelated poetry, and everything concerning the Lost Dutchman mine. You can see where I got all the yellow highlight on all the books that I've purchased. But it's good, and he has a publication which I don't think it goes up in the last couple of years, but it covers a lot of the stuff. He puts it in there by type, whether it's core works of the Dutchman, interrelated works, fiction, and then juvenile books for kids. And then he does a historic one that's just the chronology, which is really nice. So it's a nice book to have. It's not a real expensive or thick book or anything, but it's nice if you're looking to collect. David, heads up, because yeah, it's a nice book to have because you can check off and see. The website has footnotes and things on it that you can look at about the different editions and so forth. So it's really there you go. So, okay. There we go. We got the Bayon trying to catch up. We were in Nebraska and we said hi to Bob. Jason likes his book. I just ordered it. It's a Lost Dutchman book about a guy that says he found the Lost Dutchman. And I kind of was around long before he even wrote the book, talking with Jason and all. I think he did a fine job of putting his thoughts and his manner in the order of it. Now, when it comes to Lost Dutchman books, let's remember there's several types. There's the type that I favor the most. Tom Collenborn's Ride Through Time, Helen Corbin's Curse of the Dutchman. I like the books that have no opinion. It's not an adventure story. It's not anything other than just material and reference material. Chronology of the Lost Dutchman by Tom Collenborn, which tells you all the newspaper articles over the last 100 and some odd years, is a very difficult book to get. But those books are my favorites. Killer Mountains I liked because it was an adventure story, but it was very documented with really good history. You could look something up from it. We didn't have the internet back then, but you could go and reference, and the bibliography was good. Then you have the adventure ones, which Sim Zeeley's book, Barry Storms, is definitely more along. It kind of falls into that. They start kind of taking you on a journey with them in the mountains a bit. A lot of authors do that. They kind of share. Thomas Glover did that a bit. They also have their opinions on certain things. I know it's really hard to write or talk without your opinion, but you want to always look at two sides of the coin, or multiple sides of the block, as it would be, of what you're talking about. Then you have the people that found the Lost Dutchman mine. Got on my desk here with Jason's book, I have at least 3 others. So Jason will not be the first. He's not probably going to be the last person that found the Lost Dutchman mine that will speak at the rendezvous. He's in good company. Ron Feldman, Jesse Feldman, Jack Sanfelice, Brian McDonough did that. Robert Kesselring did that. Yes, we've had a good dozen people that have found the mine and have come out and talked to us and shared with us, and most of them had books, and that's kind of what that is. You can disagree with their theory or their hypothesis or what their findings are, and I don't think that makes a bit of difference. It doesn't change my amount of respect or anything for someone because they did something I really just don't put the time or mind to, because I don't want to sit down and write a book. If I did, it would be about something interrelated differently. That's always my problem, is I know what I like to read. I don't know if it's what other people like to read, but I find the books that I like the most in that whole set are the ones that sell the most. Jack Carlson and Elizabeth Stewart's hiking guides, I think, are top of the list. Probably 2 of the best-selling volumes there are. Tom Collenborn's Ride Through Time, easy top seller. I mean, we're talking with Jack's 50, 60,000 copies. Sim Zeeley, which had multiple editions, Thunder God's Gold, you're tens of thousands, if not more, copies. Those books I find sometimes are the books I like the most, and then I always look at it as why do I like those, and then I realize that there's a difference and a rhyme reason. Bark Notes, of course, we have no way to calculate that because it's not published, never has been, and probably never will be. But the Bark Notes for me are the easiest, one of the best, because you can kind of historically timeline put things together, and it's nice to have a snapshot from the time. It's the only book of or manuscript of its type like that. Barry Storm's coming in, even with Trail of the Dutchman, 30, 40 years later. So Jim Bark was actually there, and he's the principal editor, writer of that material. So I hope you enjoy it, Robert. Do you think Doc Thorne's mine and Walt's could be no, because Doc Thorne, mine would be in New Mexico if it was anywhere. We actually did a video on that, talking about that, how that all kind of fell apart. Thomas Glover did a really good job with that story, as did I'm trying to remember who else did, but they did a lot of work tracking down stuff and all that. And yeah, Thorne's mine shouldn't have been, and it wasn't a mine. In the same time, it was more of a placer area. Thomas Glover's first is good, but I disagree with the Holmes. Well, the Holmes manuscript's just manuscript. Manuscript is Brownie having a ghostwriter sit down and try to do that. The problem with the Holmes manuscript is the second half of it is Brownie talking about kind of his time in the mountains and some of his stories, which is fine. That's the part I like. I will always read that. The early first third half of it is Dick Holmes' story, which doesn't historically line up with anything. And if you collect, if you're a historian, if you have material, you will find over through newspaper and other interviews with Dick Holmes, because Dick Holmes, Ida Holmes, his wife, and Brownie, prior to that being written, it was really kind of like really rough, because they changed the story at least a dozen times, and just every aspect of it. So it's problematic that it's kind of almost a fictional story. Dick Holmes' interaction with Jacob Waltz. Clay Worst and I talked about that. I did not record him because I told Clay, I said, I really never want to put you on the spot on this. I wish I would have, because now that he's gone, it would be nice to hear his words. He didn't agree implicitly, but he said, yeah, you have to wonder about a lot of that stuff, which I was happy to hear him say that, because I was thinking, you do, because Jacob Waltz seemed to know he was a naturalized citizen, and Jim Bark did, and Julia Thomas and Reinhard Petrasch did, but somehow Dick Holmes got a completely different statement out of Waltz. How Waltz forgot that, who knows? Okay, and Thomas's first book was his best book, but again, if you read it, he was close. He really liked the home stuff. He really liked Clay, and it fed into it a bit. And he had a couple other people fed him some false narratives and so forth, and that kind of hurt it a little. I always thought he was going to rewrite it and change that a bit, and he did write 4 books total. The third book didn't really change that much, and the fourth book still kind of... So I like the third book because it's him and Len and his buddies out, and some of the stories of them, which he would tell me. And then the fourth book was all right. I mean, it kind of, he was recapturing the same book, which Jack San Felice kind of did, Jesse did, where they're just kind of going back. I don't know why. Here's a great book. Take all the documented material, letters, everything. There's hundreds of pieces of information. Write an Adolph Ruth book. You'd be surprised at looking at the letters and information how different that story is than what you read in most people's books. You'd be like, oh, the guy went out, he died of natural causes and died here, and Tex Barkley, the Ruth family sent him the maps, and it's a completely different story than what you read. But that's just amassing, and I've always said, I'm not an Adolph Ruth murder mystery fan, but when it comes to the material and stuff, I got files like that, because there was so much documentation material and so many letters between Sims Healy, Jim Bark, Irwin Ruth, Earl Ruth, I can't remember Adolf's wife's name, but her. There's just so much information between people writing about the particulars that you really start to look at it and see it different and we forget sometimes these are very real people that had very real lives, that had very real interests in the moment in those things. So Bob Corbin, I don't know what the question on Bob Corbin is, because Curse of the Dutchman, if you're talking about the book, Bob Corbin, that was Helen, his wife. She wrote Center's Gold. She did one on some guy in Alaska or up north or something. I can't remember what that one's called. And then she did Center's Gold. She did the Bible. And then she did Curse of the Dutchman. So I think it's 4 books. Did you find out anything about Richard Holmes' gem mine? I looked and looked, and it's in Maricopa County. Or no, it's in Yavapai County. And there is so much disinformation from a bunch of the Holmes guys. And I am still working on it. I wrote down everything I could possibly find. I know the area it's in. I'm going to probably head up there. It's by Holmes Creek, by their property that they had up there. And it's kind of like... again, it's kind of an interesting story because the particular Thomas Glover even mentions, and he tried to find ways around it, is they always referred to the older senior as Richard Holmes, and they always called Dick Holmes to separate him. And then when they referenced Dick Holmes in the opal mines and all this stuff, it means they're not referring to Richard, his dad. And they had business dealings between them because his dad did support him quite a bit. So you're trying to sort this stuff out a little. And I think, would it be like a revelation that find out that he was out of town when Waltz died? I don't think it really would be. So, because Reinhard Petresch said, his statement straight up, what do you think of the Dick Holmes story? If Dick Holmes ever met Jacob Waltz, it was in the afterlife. So that kind of tells you all of it. And, you know, people on the Holmes side like to build the feud and the vision. But always remember, things got so mucky, and when people want to know why did it get so far off from what Julia Thomas and Reinhard Petresch were doing, it's because they were accused of talking like crazy and telling everybody and selling maps. But the people that were doing all the talking were the Holmeses. They were the ones that talked to everybody and shared their story with everyone. So it's the opposite. So they did that. They tried to kick back to keep the others from ever getting any foothold in it. And it's really weird because until Jim Bark's manuscript and Sims Healy's book starts changing the whole narrative on all that stuff. Let's see here. Only channel doesn't bullshit. Straight stuff. You know, I always believe that should be it, man. Other channels bullshit. I will tell you, and this is straightforward. When I researched the stuff I do for October, a number of stories, I mean, there was channels that I just can't go to anymore. But I always try to find something particular that's believable or has a historical content or something in it that I can hang something on. Say, there is a possibility this person did exist. I found there's so many stories that they're just made up completely. It is just AI narrated, created material. And I found that with is it Mr. Ballin? He did a story in The Lost Dutchman that was completely inaccurate, and you could tell they just made up stuff to do it. And they get millions of people listening to stuff. And then when you want to know, like I said earlier, why do people not know how to search for The Lost Dutchman, or why are they so off the grid on it? Because of so much disinformation. Because they don't look at it seriously as, let's say now there's thousands of people interested in the superstitions of The Lost Dutchman. They don't care about those 1,000 people. I always made the argument when we did our show, as we were doing it and doing it right, and part of my reason for being on the internet and being streaming and do what I do is answers people's questions, because nobody's going to go out there and die as much if someone's kind of telling it to them straight. When people are just being fed a load of bull and thinking it's just like it's no big thing, things happen. Well, there's been a lot less deaths. I mean, the people that have died and disappeared in the mountains more recently haven't been searching for the Lost Dutchman. They've been hiking or just getting out stretching their legs, or, you know, it's just a different kind of deal there. All right, let's go. Castor oil around the eyes and the... Okay. Look young and fresh with castor oil. Yeah, that's probably good for you. Well, you got to sleep too. Well, if you're looking for Jacob, he's up around the bend. He hangs out the ice cream stand with all his friends. Okay. Did you sit up all night last night writing that? You're not big on the Ted Cox stuff and Ron's findings. Well, here's the problem, Robert. Before Ron wrote his book and came out with his Ted Cox stuff, a bunch of the Ted Cox stuff was at Greg Davis's. And I got to read Ted Cox's, one of his manuscripts. And I got to read, I would put it in there with Dos Lucas and Crazy Jake stuff, where I was like, what is this guy talking about? And it was like, I'm going to rewrite history fundamentalist. I mean, I don't know what he was doing. And I asked, after I read a bunch of it, because I have a copy of Ted Cox's stuff around here, his manuscript, and I was just like, okay, he's not a writer, one, and Ron really got into that stuff, and Ron met his wife, and there was, and Ted was out there looking for it and stuff, but Ted said stuff that didn't line up with other people that knew people, and it just didn't work. And then I started asking some people, and Tom Collenborn and a few other people said, Ted's boom, and they said, yeah, that's what the problem you're having with it is. They're just kind of like disconnected with reality at times. So that was my problem with it, is on Ted Cox's stuff, is I read too much of his stuff. And I usually he didn't have to be a great writer, but he didn't have to just make stuff up. And he made a lot of stuff up. And Ron and I have talked about that, how Ted would be like, oh man, I don't know. So it's interesting, but I thought it was kind of a little out there, some of the stuff he was saying. And I don't believe, if someone's making a statement, you can't sit there and take pieces of the parts you like and then take away the insanity. I mean, it doesn't work that way. And that was one of the problems I had with a number of things. Well, there was a lot of problems with things. So Ron and I are buddies, and you can believe in different things, and had Ron talk about that. I had Ron's been a guest speaker once or twice at the Rendezvous, and I always invite him and I talk to him, and I respect Ron a hell of a lot. But yeah, I know too much about that and a lot of that stuff. And that was my big problem, is I got to read Ted Cox's stuff before Ron did his books. And that was kind of like, I was asking questions and then talking to people that knew Ted Cox and knew him personally, and that kind of drove me away from it. So, and the same could be said for Crazy Jake stuff, because I saw he wrote a big old manuscript. Nobody should ever publish that. Dos Lucas. See, Bob Ward wrote some cool stuff, and he had some interesting ideas, and a lot of it wasn't just Superstition Mountain Lost Dutchman stuff. But he could write, and you could tell he was very intelligent, even though he was a step off. He was off beat from most people. And there's a big difference in that. Sometimes people are a little kind of loose in the head. And that's the problem, is when they are like that, they go off on weird tangents. Still shiver when I hear those spook boxes around the Super Safe Scary spook boxes. What are the spook boxes? I don't even know what that is. P.C. Bicknell was supposed to be searching for mines before Waltz. Did he know Waltz? I don't think Bicknell knew. He was a newspaper guy. Remember, there was a lot of gold mining and mining activity out that area before Waltz died. There's a lot of indications that nobody had a clue what Waltz was doing, which is pretty obvious. Bicknell really didn't get interested in the first. He's searching for the Two Soldiers mine, which that was a story that preceded Waltz's death, and he was in a lot of different places. Bicknell, I mean, that was another problem too, as people started acting like, well, P.C. Bicknell was over by Rogers Canyon and Iron Mountain. He was in a lot of places in the mountains, and then he got a big inheritance, and then he decided not to write about that stuff and kind of quit doing it. He was getting older too, so it wasn't like he was the hardcore Dutch hunter and all that. So that's the end to my song. There you go. Ron says he found the LDM. That after that he lost me. Again, Ed, let's make a point here. I can name 20 people right now that found the Lost Dutchman mine. Say they found the Lost Dutchman mine. They all, 20 of them, were in different places. So nobody finds it in the same place unless they're part of the crew of the one guy. So there can be 4 or 5 people say it's right here, and you'll say, well, they're in agreement. Well, they were there together, so that's their thing. Yeah, I've heard so many different stories. The only person I know that never told me he knew where it was Clay, and Clay told me, I believe I'm within a quarter mile of it. And we were sitting in his living room looking out the window, and I was like, huh. I said, you want to give me any heads up where I could look for you or help you out here? And he went, nah, it's all good. I'm thinking, okay, if you were a quarter mile from it, yeah, okay. So there's places I suspect that I would love where you can't get a backhoe in. I'd love to dig just to see what's there. But, yeah, some of these. One of my biggest problems with whether you want to call it the Silver King or Silver Chief or the Pit Mine or the Lost Dutchman. Let's call it the Feldman Dutchman. My biggest problem with that is it's been on the topo maps the whole time. So it kind of spoils that, right? So they're just saying somebody else had gone in there after Waltz and worked it out, basically, mainly, and all that kind of stuff. All right. And if you're at the rendezvous, there's a couple people you can step to the side with and talk to about it, and they will tell you about their history with that. And it will make you feel kind of like, oh, that makes sense, and that's where it is. We had a couple of those discussions late at night at the rendezvous. Hey, Dallas. And that stuff comes to me naturally. Okay, there you go. Did Ron Eagle ever find anything of significance? Ron believes so. Ron always was up. I mean, the last time I saw Ron, before he got sick and died, Ron pumped my hand vigorously, stood there, gave me a big hug, and get to this. But he shook my hand, and it was kind of like he was telling me about something, and he had it, and he was going to get it now that Trump was president, and he was going to get it because Trump and the Department of Agriculture would support him on this. He's already written letters, and they've written him back, and we had like an hour conversation about that. In the meanwhile, Dave Chase, you might know him as Chief Running Mouth, was in his full makeup and everything with his tomahawk, and Dave was behind him laughing his butt off. But Ron was 110% in. He had it figured out. And I listened to him, and I always liked Ron. Ron was always a good storyteller and talker. So we sat there and talked, and then I was really sad because I didn't see him for a bit. I saw him at the bar a few times, but just said, hey, Ron, went through. And then just one day, Shoes told me, hey, he's really sick. Just like suddenly he's got the cancer. And it was like a week or two later, he's like, he's dead. And that was it. And then we had the funeral. So that really happened. Frank always wanted to dig. You always moved him on. Frank don't want to dig. He wants to tell people to dig. Frank doesn't dig. Frank digs. It goes about 3 inches. He goes, yeah, we should dig here. Frank don't dig. Where are you getting that stuff from? I got that stuff on video, Frank. Yeah. Dig it right here. He carries that shovel around, and as soon as he gets a chance, the pickaxe or shovel goes in somebody else's hand. So, did Clay think the Bulldog was the LDM? No. He knew it was the Bulldog. He knew it was always the Bulldog. There. So, that's that. You don't acknowledge them, David. All right. Silver Chief was being mined while the Dutchman was alive. Yeah, oh yeah. I think the Dutchman. Well, here's the thing. Why would you say to two people, "I'm going to take you up my camp and everything else. I've been out there and grabbed another cache, and no one's been up there disturbed everything. We'll be able to do this." Blah 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 blah. This whole thing. The Silver Chief was in the newspapers. He knew people were in that area. You would think he would have been like, "Hey, we need to go in there and quiet." They had people working in there at the time. So Waltz is taking them back, and they're gonna ride. I mean, it doesn't make sense, the two stories. And the way Bark vetted Reinhardt and Julia, what they were telling him is what Waltz told them. It wasn't made up, okay? It wasn't a fictitious story on that of, we're gonna go do this now. We're not gonna, And once he got, he told them, "Hey, we get there. I'll kind of point the way the mine is, but we're going to get back out of there." It makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's one of the biggest problems with the Silver Chief in that area, is it was being worked on at the very time Waltz should have been in and out of it. It just didn't make any sense. He would have been very aware of it, but he had no clue. But hey, you need closure sometimes, right? You want closure, and it works on TV. I mean, to say, "Hey, I'm the one that found the Lost Dutchman mine." Yeah, we found the Lost Dutchman. It works good on TV. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't jump in the TV and go, "No, you didn't." No, so. Is that when my ears are going to peak at the rendezvous? At what? Well, there's a lot of things can make you peak. You have to sit back and wait. And there are people that will be reluctant. And in moments you can start talking. And if they're comfortable, there are quiet moments at the rendezvous when let's put it this way, never expect Don Quixote to tell you the truth. Because Don Quixote is crazy about what he's talking about, right? But look for Sancho. Because Sancho, the guys that are out there doing the digging that you never hear from, that never write the books, those guys are around. And those guys always can tell you the story. So I always learned a lot about certain things by going, "Oh, you were up there? Oh, okay." It was the murder at Crazy Jake's camp with, I'm trying to remember his name, the Mexican cook, Laszlo. When that all happened and transpired, Shoes went out there right after it happened. He was dropping supplies off. And he knew a lot of it. He knew the story and how he was deported. And then he came back, and then he was working around town. He hadn't seen him in years. But Shoes knew a lot inside about that whole story and what happened. And he was there right after it happened. He said you could see where Laszlo got nervous, and because he didn't speak English. And when he went to shoot the gun, he said there was canvas over top of the cook area. And he said you could tell when he was pulling the gun, he just kept pulling the trigger, and the gun just kept pulling up and just went shooting holes through the top. So he said it was basically, in Shoes' terms, a guy who was an asshole that went to push someone who was scared to death that couldn't communicate with him, and that person got scared for his life because no one else was around and thought he was going to die, and he tried to defend himself. And he was not put in jail or anything for that. It was self-defense, they believed, and all that worked out. But because he was here illegally, he was deported, and then later he came back. So there you go. But yeah, you get to hear stories like that and certain things, and then and that was one of the things I always liked with the rendezvous, because those guys are disappearing, but they still show up. And there's guys that come up and go, "Hey, remember me?" "Yeah." And then they come over, and you'll see me off to the side with one of them talking, and they'll talk to me about stuff and say, "Hey, did anybody ever tell you about this?" And I said, "I heard about that a little." A lot of Crazy Jake's crew members over time got to talk to a lot of those guys, and they always have stories. And they have the story from the perspective, I can't believe how that guy basically pulled my chain that back. Because they will tell you, when you were there, you believed in it. You believed in it. He had you believing. They said Jake didn't like to spend time out there. He kept us out there, and he kept us to the point where we didn't have any money. We barely were fed, and it was rough. And then he'd come in and treat you really good, and it'd get you all pumped up to go back. And they said there was a psychology to it all. And to this day, Feldman will say always, Crazy Jake told him a lot of ways how you treat people out in the mountains, and a lot of ways how you don't. So it's all important. Uh, where the Peraltas originally for searching for gold, so probably anything. Gold would have been much, much better, but they would have. I'm sure they would have done silver. The difference between gold and silver is gold ore. If you can find really rich gold ore, you can back it up, cob it up, break it down as much as possible, and you can haul it out of there, and it's probably more cost effective to you. With silver, takes a while longer and all. Now there are rastras been found throughout the superstitions, so they were processing all the stuff out towards Hewitt and Iron Mountain and all that. You get out in that area, there's a lot more silver. And just look at it in them. You got the bulldog, the black queen, the mammoth, and the wasp, and the gold, the very rich gold mines, which have silver and copper in them. And then you go through the mountains, and then you hit down into that area. We'll call it the Silver Chief territory, and there's a lot of silver. And there's some gold, and there's copper. And then you go down and follow that angle down, and you end up in Globe, Miami, and those areas. And what do you run into? A lot of copper. There's silver and gold, but it's a lot of copper. So there's a mineral. The mineral runs through. The difference between Goldfield and that eastern superstition border there, what you would call the western and central superstitions, a lot of it is the calderas. And I'm hoping to get the individual to talk a bit about that, so I don't want to spoil it too much, but he explained why that is. And I took his words and then decided to go back, and instead of reading the book where it says, oh, there's no gold in the Western superstitions, I decided to look at it as, what are people saying during that heyday time? And I found there were a lot of people, and there was articles about very rich, really promising mines in the Western superstitions. So in areas we wouldn't even think. So were people hitting more surface deposits and looked like it was going to be rich, and then it just played out? Yes, and he said that's what would happen in some of those areas because of the caldera effect and so forth. So could the Lost Dutchman, the world's richest gold mine, be in the Western superstitions? Absolutely, 100%. There's nothing that says it couldn't, because there's been more than enough gold found there. And there's been plenty of gold prospects, and there's been plenty of people that were nominally successful. You got to remember, too, 40, 50 years ago, gold wasn't really, it was valuable, but it was not what it is today. What are we looking at, $4,000 an ounce now? And we're talking in the hundreds before. The Dons of Arizona used to use real gold in their gold panning for trek. They could afford to buy real gold, so you could go home with a real placer. It was cheap enough to do. And I remember as a kid, you would have people that, because it could be profitable. Definitely the placer and the flakes and stuff. Now you don't do that because it just wouldn't economically work out. So we're in a whole different headspace. So think of back then, and how much gold did somebody need? People were mining silica. I mean, every mineral has its value. And that was another discussion I had with another geologist was, is it just, people go into that quartz and it needs to be in granite and it needs to do this, you need the iron and all this, and they were like, wherever you go, never think that it's impossible, because you don't know the geology you're walking on. You can think you know it, but you don't know how things intersect. And they said the superstitions, because of the calderas, the supervolcanic activity, changes everything, because you're looking at a completely different set of rules for that area. So who knows? So what the Peraltas were searching for, it appeared to be mainly gold, though. That was a really long answer for that. Hey, Super Walt. There we go. Did you ever find any coke ovens in the mountains? Not in the superstition. There are outside of there where they had more production stuff. There was supposed to be some up in Fish Creek that they talked about that were, the Bob Ward ones that he said that were there. And I don't know about that. I don't see any evidence of it. So there you go. Gold panning at Rawhide. Yeah, remember Rawhide used to do that? Patchy Land everybody used to do it. back when I was a kid, it was real gold. You could get a little tiny vial, and there'd be some real pieces of gold in there. And I kept those little vials. And it's really funny because when I got older, I basically dumped them just to see. And there was actually a couple pieces of real gold. Nothing nugget, nothing major. But there was some. And there's garnets, and they would do, pyrite in there. But there would be something. So, the possibilities. We're flying right along. 444. Dang. It's also an evening off for the Chicago Cubs. 2-2. We will see what kind of mood I'm in next week. Do you think someone would go to prison when they find... No. Why would you go to prison? I found the last one. There's a dozen people should be off to prison. If you did something illegally and they caught you at it, but everybody seems to have gotten... Outside of Crazy Jake, I'm trying to think if anybody really got in trouble, went to prison. Well, okay, Bill Bemo did, the barber, but he killed Trapper. So that would happen, but that wasn't searching for the Lost Dutchman. He killed him because, he was losing his mind about that. We should do that story. So Jack San Felice told that story over in Mysteries and kind of didn't tell all of it. I should get a couple of the guys that are at the rendezvous that know that story and were there the day after when he was found dead. And we should talk about it and do one on that because that's an interesting story. That one thing I hate is when you got people that can actually tell the story, go to them first. Quit being like, oh, me, I'll tell you that story. If I can get someone else to tell that story, I always will, especially if someone's been there. And if they beg off, I make a lot of notes and kind of know. And there's a number of people I've talked to that knew, were there. And, yeah, so, but that's a sad story in itself as well. Was mercury ever found within the rastras? I'm sure there was. There's mercury. Well, there's cinnabar. There's when you're going down Peralta Road, when you go into the rendezvous, right when you get past Peralta County Park, onto the right in that spot there is Doc Nation's mercury mine, which is a cinnabar mine, was back in there. And I know somebody showed it to me where it was. It was like I stood off. And I said, where is that? We walked over and then they showed me about where it was. And I was like, okay, it's over there. And I know supposedly Henry Burns had a cinnabar mine. So there you go. So yes, there's, I'm not a cinnabar fan. Here, a good one is at a rock show. And this guy had all this stuff laid out, and I'm looking at it, and I was really surprised that he had 3 or 4 of those little jewelry boxes that had cinnabar in it, and one of them kind of was broken down a little, and I was like, "Whew!" And I turned to Trevor and I said, "You don't want to mess with that, and definitely don't mess with that one. Don't breathe. That's the stuff you don't want to mess with, Trevor." And we walked down a ways, and this guy's kid walks over, picks it up, and the kid's eating like something in one hand, and he's picking up the rock and talking to his dad, and his dad's saying, "Yeah, it says cinnabar." And then the kid sets it down, and I'm like, turned, and I said, "Have your kid wash his hands. That's cinnabar. It's mercury." And his dad's just looking at me dumb, and I'm just like, I looked at Trevor and I said, fortunately your dad is at least somewhat knowledgeable and paid attention in science class. But it's amazing. I would not want to mess with stuff. I don't want to mess with stuff that's going to make me sick or die. I don't know. It's just a thing I have, Is it illegal to take anything off Compton National? Yeah. What do you mean? Tonto National? You can take something. There's laws. If there's something that's within a certain date range, you're not supposed to. You can't take artifacts. You can't take it unless it's on private property and you have permission. At one time, people took monos, metates, whatever they wanted, skulls out of the mountains. They have laws in effect. You can't even take arrowheads. If it's more recent trash, you can take the trash and clean it up and take it out. But if they consider it of a historical artifact from a certain time, no. But it's also kind of like a weird, twisty thing because a lot of stuff in there is stuff that the Forestry Service has hauled out. So, like, car parts and different things. So, the old, well, it wasn't a Corsair. It was a Canadian plane, wasn't it? I can't remember what it was, a PT something. But anyways, parts and stuff from that, people always took scraps and bits and pieces. But you shouldn't take anything of the ho-ho-cum or anything like that. So there's laws against that. You don't want to get caught with that. Leave it for other people. Let other people see it. How did you tell in the 80s if a mine had good air quality before you went too far? I'm still here, so I got really freaking lucky. I didn't even think about that stuff. I mean, let's be honest. If I could smell, funny story is when we were out in Wickenburg, north of Wickenburg, out by Constellation Camp, north of there, up in some mines way out in the hills. And it's me, Randy Wright, and Greg Davis, and we got deep. And we're going around this corner and all, we're talking. And then I looked at Randy and I said, man, it smells like wet, rotten eggs, man. I said, we need to turn around and get out. The air quality's getting bad. And Randy agreed. We turned around and Greg goes, oh, that's okay. I farted. And he thought it was funny. God. I don't think I ever thought of that much about bad air. I didn't when I was younger. I don't think a lot of people did. But we never were going 1,000 feet in, 1,500 feet down. We were never doing anything like that. We just went into mines and just, got lucky. And most of the time, to be honest with you, I was smoking a cigarette. So go figure that one, right? I'm going in the mines, smoking a cigarette, just and never thought about it. You can't use a metal detector, you can't use a drone, you can't use any. Yes, you can't. Yeah, but that's so. I mean, people take metal detectors, and I'm not telling you to, but people do, and people have metal detected in the Superstitions, and people have used other products. They have rules set in place that say you can't do anything, but they also say you can take 2 handfuls, and you can prospect. You can't mine. You can put an application in for a permit to mine, but you can prospect, and there's very fine lines and all that. So you can put in the permit, put the application in for permit for treasure trove permit, which is, I think Ron Feldman really did the one at Rogers Trough just to prove the point, and I think the reason they gave it to him is just to let that one stand. But it would be nice if occasionally someone went in and did their work. But here's the problem. It costs you so much to get it that there better be something, because you're going to lose yourself. You can lose your house in the process, which is why I tell people they have adopt a burrow, adopt a bunch of burrows, go in, do your thing. Nobody's looking, leave, write a fiction book about it, and just pay with cash for all your incidentals, and you're fine. There is a way around it all. There's plenty of ways around everything. There's been plenty of people come out of those mountains with gold and silver and not been in trouble with it. I've seen plenty of people dig out there in those mountains, and I won't say the names, but there's been more than a few. I mean, they did it on Lust for Gold Race Against Time. They tried to, what's hilarious? That movie, Robert May and Bob Brown, man, they made that movie with Kesselring. Kesselring and them go in there and they start digging, looking for treasure. And they're digging and they're not finding it. And you're thinking, but that's illegal because they don't have permits. And they're not prospecting, they're digging for buried treasure. And then they find that guy, what was his name, Razzo, his stuff, and he's got plastic caps and stuff. And then they just get livid that he's out there illegally doing this stuff. And it's like, but just 5 minutes ago in the film, you guys were doing the same shit. I always thought that was so hilarious, as like, comedy of errors. It's like, yes, yeah, they were all out there. Then they make it into a feature film. It goes to film festivals. It gets released to the public. And nobody ever got in trouble for any of it. And Bob Kesselring's still talking about it and did 2 books on it. And who knows? So there you go. So to the Bobs. There's plenty of Bobs. There's Bob Shoes, Bob Kesselring. There's Bob Ward. There's Bob Corbin. Lots of Bobs. Well, at least like the $400 Mueller detector. I don't even know where you're going now. I thought his crew was. Oh, don't say that. Kesselring's a cool dude. Hey, hey, Billy Bob. Um, those. Hey, Bill Blackwell comes to the rendezvous, and Bill's going to be out there soon, opening his doors to treasure still. Um, I don't know. That was, when they showed me the rushes, because I got to see that film as they were putting it together. So I saw that film before everyone but the producers and the editors. They were sending me different cuts of it and asking me about it. And I got to watch. And it wasn't terrible at first, but it was long and it was hard. And it opened with Rick and closed with Rick. So it was a little different. They kind of bookended it, and then later they did the Rick stuff kind of like as an add-on. What they came up with in the end, there was stuff they cut out, but it was too boring, and that was part of the problem. Is you had a group of guys that really didn't know what they were doing, and they weren't looking for gold. Remember that. They were looking for buried treasure according to Kesselring's interpretation of the stone maps and the Latin heart. That was his deal. And because of that, they're just without treasure trove permit. And I know a lot of inside of that whole thing and how that all came down. But they just turned them loose. And then I asked the guys, because now, Kesselring did show up. Him and Jason showed up at the film festival, but Bill Blackwell, I talked to a couple of the other guys before all that. And I asked them, I said, what was this like, man? What's going on with this stuff? And it was really funny because they were like, oh, man, it was a lot worse than that. It was like, so I won't say all those stories and stuff because that's for, Bob or Bill to talk about. And I still like them and I get along with them. But yeah, it was kind of like a comedy of errors because it was taking guys who really weren't treasure hunters or prospectors and kind of throwing them out there in the wrong set of circumstances. And it just came off just like, I'm glad they didn't get hurt. And I'm glad they kind of stopped. And they decided to be more roadside treasure hunters because that was much safer and better. Funny video about gold you watch, and they show none. Yeah, well, hardly a gram, Well, here, you want to hear what they do in gold shows? And this doesn't matter whether it's Parker Schnabel or Tony Beat or anybody, Frank. They don't sell a lot of their gold. They keep a lot of it. And then they just keep adding little bit by little bit and purchase it. And then they keep adding it to what they show you each time. So you think they're always finding it. But then you also hear they sold it. So you're trying to figure out what you're seeing compared. Yeah, they don't, there's that sleight of hand television that they do. And it's good for TV. I mean, come on, let's face it. Most people do that well once or twice, you're just done. You're going to walk away because of the risk factor, right? You play the lottery, you win $50 million. Are you playing the lottery anymore? No, you win $50 million and now you're just living your life and saying, that was really cool. I'll write a book about it and make a little money on that. You're not going out and spending a bunch of money on lottery tickets again. It was just sad someone took his stuff, his info, and went and blew stuff. No, go prove some of that. No, that was another thing. Someone blew stuff up and this and that, but we never had pictures and never saw it beforehand. I mean, that was a weird thing. A lot of that was made up stuff. It was a really kind of a weird thing. I don't know. Somebody started digging and blasting where you were digging and you were going to blast. Yeah. Okay. I remember watching the original, And they remade it using some of the first movie footage. Yeah, I liked what they did by adding the original Lust for Gold to that film and how they said it. I wish they would have done a little better job of keeping the comedy out. Make it a straight up comedy, but they didn't have enough of that. And then they tried to too often try to get it turned to make you feel like it was serious, and it really wasn't. Again, just show me. I don't know. So, and there's a lot of things I could say about all that, and I won't, because I like Bob Kesselring, and I get along with him pretty well. I always liked him. We had a great call. In fact, before Lust for Gold, Race Against Time came out, he got really unhappy because he finally saw some of the footage. And when he saw some of it and stuff, he took it the wrong way, and he called me up and warned me and said to get out of there and stop doing that, and you completely, they're out to get us and all this. He really, and I talked to him and tried to, be like, no, I think you're seeing it wrong and you're catching it wrong and stuff like that. Is Jason still here? You're talking about Fritch? I don't know. I haven't seen him for a while. But it was rough because those guys, at one point in time, one of their ideas was to put them all in an RV, put Rick Gwynn, Robert Kesselring, Bill Blackwell, the entertainment attorney, and Salvador Delgadillo in an RV. And they were going to have them drive around the country and do little premieres in theaters and sell tickets and do a little press thing, and then the next day have a film thing and advertise it and do interview. They're going to have them travel in an RV. And I said, my God, man, film those guys living together on an RV. Rick Gwynn, Salvador Delgadillo, Bob Kesselring, and Bill Blackwell. And I finally asked, just before they decided to do some of the release of the film, I have a bunch of stuff from the film, by the way. I have things from the film that are really, really cool. But I still have posters with all the everybody originally from the film signed on them. There's only a handful of those around. Well, now that Rick's passed away. But it was just, I was like, that's going to be the best film ever. Is these guys in an RV trying to sell this movie to people, talking their treasure hunting. And at the time, Bill Blackwell and Robert Kesselring and Rick Gwynn were in a little bit of a feud. So it was going to be beautiful. And then they said, well, no, we pulled the plug on that. And I was like, no, that would have been great. They would have been coming. It was old men too crippled to fight that were angry with each other. That would have been great. And Salvador in the middle of it, not making any sense. Just want to say thank you for joining tonight. Oh, he's saying that to Jason. Talking about the 1994. Yeah, we know what you're talking about. You don't have to say it twice. Yes, but there are two movies, and the first one was the Glenn Ford movie, which had nothing to do with The Lost Dutchman, and had nothing to do with the book. It was kind of crazy, really, because Barry Storm, oddly enough, one of the things Kesselring got mad about is he thought they were trying to portray him as a modern-day Barry Storm, and he was a big Barry Storm fan, so I thought he'd be fine with that. But the funny thing is, Barry Storm was mad at the original movie because it had nothing really to do with his book, and they felt it was trying to portray him as the son of Jacob Waltz, grandson of Jacob Waltz, and that was where his lawsuits and a bunch of stuff came in, and he got really angry. Storm would have been smart. He would have wrote the fictional account kind of based off part of the movie and introduced those elements and done that, and he would have cleaned up. Instead, he just kept doing. Yeah, he must be I don't know what he's doing. I mean, he has to be doing some sort of spoken word thing, because there's no way he's typing that out, typing it out and hitting it. Dallas, I really don't think he is, because it would be, once you send it, it would just vanish. So it has to be a chat thing. Pizza tonight. or Chinese. It's pizza tonight. It's Peter Piper. Peter Piper. I love Peter Piper. Grew up down the street from the very first Peter Piper that went in at 43rd and Glendale. That very first one. That was one of my favorite pizza places, and that's my boyhood pizza place. That dates me a little. I don't know when that went in. I wonder when that went in. It was sometime in the 70s. I remember when they went in. That place went in. Was there? I think there's still one down there, but they moved it from where it originally was. It was back beside the McDonald's originally, across from John's Liquors, or the liquor store across the street. Anyways, we're getting down. We're winding down. It's grocery night. It's pizza night. I gotta go pick up pizza. Oh, I miss Peter Piper at Tower Plaza. Yeah, Peter Piper, man. It's not the Italian pizza, the Chicago style pizza, New York style pizza that people love. But there's something about it that the next morning, that is such good pizza. So I really like me Peter Piper pizza. And I think it has to do with growing up having it, because we never had fast food. And then my parents would go out and they'd play cards and stuff with friends, bridge and pinochle and different games like that. So they would go out to play cards. So it'd be, what do you want for dinner? And they had the McDonald's, but I don't think we ever ate McDonald's. And I could say, hey, a pizza from Peter Piper. And that was a big deal. Every few weeks, they would buy me a large pepperoni pizza. And that was mine for the next 24 hours. That's what I ate. So that was a big deal. Another cool conversation. Thank you, Ed. Well, thank you guys, man. You guys make it happen. Cavendish is going, I get it. I'll see myself out. Jason, you have a good dinner. I'm glad to hear you're doing well, man. We'll push that all out, and the lecture will go down, and we'll have everything set up. We'll get on the phone here soon, Jason, just so I can coordinate your needs. I don't know if you're bringing a laptop or you'll bring a thumb drive for a laptop. You'll have to let me know. I don't know if it makes any difference. I'll have to ask Trevor, because Trevor, I think, uses Mac. So, but you being another college guy and all that, I don't know if you're using Mac and stuff, or if it makes any difference what programs. We'll get all that sorted out. Steve, sometimes the truth hurts. Truth never hurts. Truth sets you free. Have a great weekend. Keep your socks dry this weekend. I'm going to go barefoot in the rain. Dallas. I got all my work done this week. I got the Cubs on Saturday, and I plan on keeping my feet indoors and dry. See y'all next time. Thank you, David. Tell Lacey we all said hello. And watch that telly. I don't watch that telly. I play that telly. Thanks for another great live. See you next time. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to roll up, grab my groceries, get my pizza, sit down, eat my dinner, and get ready for the weekend. Everybody else, have a great weekend. Catch our Chasing Legends Monday, because we had a good one. Everybody seemed to really like this last one. This next couple should be good again. We're going to stick with our October theme before we get to the rendezvous. So there you go. Hit up the website, hit everything else. Don't confuse us with anyone else like you could confuse me with those other old farts, right? No possibility. They can't keep up. They couldn't keep up. Not even for a second. But here I am, and here I say, adios, my amigos. Hasta la vista, and good night. We'll catch you the next week. Have a great weekend.